Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today we are going to learn about a very powerful and very controversial man. His name is Vladimir Putin. This story is for Level 1 learners, so I will use simple words and short sentences. This story is a little different from our usual stories because it is about a real living world leader, and a story includes both admiration and serious criticism from different people around the world. I will try to tell the facts as clearly and fairly as I can. Listen carefully. Vladimir Putin was born on October 7, 1952, in a city called Leningrad in the Soviet Union. Today, this city is called St. Petersburg in Russia. Putin's family was not rich. They lived in a small, crowded apartment building, and they shared their kitchen and bathroom with other families in the building. Life in the Soviet Union, only a few years after World War II, was very hard for many ordinary families, including Putin's. Putin's parents had already lost two other children before he was born, one baby who died very young, and an older brother who died during the terrible siege of Leningrad during the war. Because of this, young Vladimir grew up as an only child, and his parents watched over him very closely. As a boy, Putin was known for being tough and sometimes getting into fights in the courtyard of his apartment building. He later said that sports helped him control his temper and gave him discipline. He started practicing judo, a Japanese martial art, and sambo, a Soviet fighting style. He became quite skilled, eventually earning a black belt in judo. This early love of sports and discipline stayed with him his whole life. Even as a teenager, Putin had one clear dream. He wanted to work for the KGB. The KGB was the secret intelligence agency of the Soviet Union, an organization that gathered information, watched citizens, and worked to protect the Soviet government from its enemies, both inside and outside the country. Putin later said he was inspired by spy movies and books that showed KGB agents as brave, clever heroes. As a teenager, Putin was so determined to join the KGB that he actually walked into a local KGB office and asked how to apply before he had even finished school. An officer there told him the agency did not accept walk-in applicants and that the best way in was through university, especially through studying law. Putin took this advice seriously. From that day, he built his entire education around this single goal, even choosing his university studies specifically because he believed a law degree would open the door to the career he wanted. To reach this goal, Putin studied law at Leningrad State University. He did well in his studies. After finishing university in 1975, the KGB accepted him. He got his wish. For the next 16 years, Putin worked as a KGB officer. Most of Putin's KGB career happened inside the Soviet Union, but from 1985 to 1990, he was sent to East Germany, to a city called Dresden. At that time, East Germany was closely controlled by the Soviet Union. Putin's job there involved gathering political and economic information and working with East German intelligence officers. It was not the exciting, high-danger spy work shown in movies. Much of it was quiet, careful, patient work, reading documents and building relationships. In 1989, huge political changes began sweeping through Eastern Europe. The Berlin Wall fell. Communist governments across the region started to collapse. Putin watched crowds of angry protesters gather outside the building where he worked in Dresden. He later described asking Moscow for instructions on what to do and receiving no clear answer. This experience, watching a powerful system collapse so quickly, deeply affected how Putin later thought about political stability and control. In 1990, Putin returned to Leningrad. The Soviet Union itself collapsed in 1991, breaking apart into many separate countries, including a new independent Russia. Putin left the KGB around this time and began working for the mayor of Leningrad, a man named Anatoly Sobchak, who had been one of Putin's law professors at university. Putin worked on foreign trade and investment for the city government. He gained a reputation as a loyal, hardworking, and very organized assistant. Through the 1990s, Putin slowly rose through Russian politics, always staying close to powerful officials, always working quietly behind the scenes rather than seeking public attention. Eventually, he moved to Moscow to work for the Russian federal government. In 1998, President Boris Yeltsin appointed Putin to lead the FSB, the intelligence agency that had replaced the old KGB. Then, in August 1999, Yeltsin made a surprising decision. He appointed Putin as Prime Minister of Russia, a very powerful government position. At that time, almost nobody outside Russian politics had heard the name Vladimir Putin. He was not a famous public figure, but everything changed very quickly. Just a few months later, on December 31st, 1999, President Yeltsin made an announcement that shocked the country. He was resigning early, stepping down from the presidency. According to Russia's constitution, this meant the Prime Minister, Putin, immediately became acting president. In March 2000, Putin won Russia's presidential election and officially became president. He was only 47 years old. During his early years as president, Putin worked to stabilize Russia's economy, which had suffered greatly during the difficult transition of the 1990s. Oil and gas prices around the world happened to rise sharply during this period, and Russia earned a great deal of money from exporting its natural resources. Many ordinary Russians saw their living standards improve noticeably compared to the chaotic 1990s, and this helped Putin become genuinely popular with much of the Russian public. However, Putin's rise to power also came with serious costs, according to many human rights organizations, journalists, and political opponents. Over his years in power, Putin's government gained increasing control over Russia's major television stations and news media. Several independent journalists who criticized the government were attacked, imprisoned, or killed under circumstances that were never fully explained. Political opponents who tried to run against Putin often found themselves blocked from elections, arrested, or forced to leave the country. One of his most famous critics, Alexei Navalny, was poisoned in 2020, survived, and was later imprisoned, where he died in 2024. Putin's government denied any involvement in these events, but many governments and human rights groups around the world believed otherwise. Russian law originally limited presidents to 2 terms in a row. Because of this rule, Putin could not run for a 3rd consecutive term in 2008. Instead, he supported a close ally, Dmitry Medvedev, who became president while Putin became prime minister again. Many observers believed Putin still held the real power during this period, even without the official title of president. In 2012, Putin ran for president again and won, returning to the position he had never truly left in the eyes of many analysts. In 2014, a major international crisis began. Following political unrest in the neighboring country of Ukraine, Russian forces took control of a region called Crimea and later annexed it, meaning Russia declared Crimea to be part of Russian territory. Nearly the entire international community refused to recognize this annexation as legal, viewing it as a violation of Ukraine's borders under international law. Russia also supported armed separatist groups in eastern Ukraine, leading to years of ongoing conflict in that region. In February 2022, this conflict grew dramatically larger. Putin ordered a full-scale military invasion of Ukraine, sending Russian troops across the border in a large-scale war that shocked much of the world. Russia's government described this as a special military operation, while most of the international community called it an illegal invasion of a sovereign, independent nation. The war caused enormous suffering, including tens of thousands of deaths, millions of refugees forced to flee their homes, and widespread destruction across Ukrainian cities. In response, the United States, the European Union, and many other countries placed severe economic sanctions on Russia. restricting trade and financial connections between Russia and much of the world economy. In 2020, Putin supported changes to the Russian constitution that reset his previous presidential terms, meaning the earlier two-term limit no longer applied to him. This change legally allowed Putin to run for president again in both 2024 and potentially 2030, meaning he could remain president if he chooses to run and continues winning elections until as late as 2036. Critics argue that Russian elections during Putin's era have not been genuinely free or fair, pointing to restricted media coverage, blocked opposition candidates, and reports of irregular voting practices. Putin's government and his supporters strongly reject these criticisms, insisting that his continued high approval ratings among Russian citizens reflect real, popular support for his leadership. Today, Putin remains president of Russia, now in his fifth presidential term. He is one of the longest-serving leaders in modern Russian history, having led the country as either president or prime minister since the final day of 1999. Vladimir Putin's story is a complicated one, and reasonable, well-informed people around the world disagree sharply about how to judge it. Some view him as a strong leader who restored order, national pride, and economic stability to Russia after a chaotic and humiliating decade. Others view him as an authoritarian leader who has steadily removed democratic freedoms inside Russia while launching a devastating war against a neighboring country. Both of these viewpoints exist strongly in the world today, and this story does not try to tell you which view is correct. Instead, it tries to give you the clear historical facts so you can think about them yourself. Here are a few important facts to remember from today's story. First, Putin rose from a very ordinary, difficult childhood to become one of the most powerful leaders in the world, largely through careful, patient work inside government institutions, not through dramatic public campaigning. Second, his 16 years working for the Soviet KGB shaped his worldview and leadership style in lasting ways. Third, his time in power includes both genuine economic improvements for many Russians and serious, well-documented restrictions on political freedom and press freedom. Fourth, his decision to invade Ukraine in 2022 became one of the most significant and destructive events in 21st century European history, with consequences still unfolding today. Learning about a leader's full story, including both the achievements his supporters point to and the serious harms his critics describe, helps us think more carefully about power itself and how quickly ordinary people can gain enormous influence over the lives of millions. Now it's time to learn vocabulary from today's story. Intelligence agency means an organization that collects secret information for a government. Example, the KGB was a powerful intelligence agency. Collapse means to suddenly fall apart or fail completely. Example, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Appoint means to choose someone officially for a job or position. Example, Yeltsin appointed Putin as prime minister. Resign means to officially quit a job or position. Example, Yeltsin resigned as president in 1999. Stabilize means to make something steady and less likely to change suddenly. Example, Putin worked to stabilize the economy. Annex means for one country to take control of another country's land and claim it as its own. Example, Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. Invasion means when one country's army enters another country by force. Example, the invasion of Ukraine began in 2022. Sanction means an official punishment, often economic, placed on a country. Example, many countries place sanctions on Russia. Authoritarian means having strong, often unfair, control over a country and its people. Example, critics call his government authoritarian. Constitution means the basic set of laws and rules a country is governed by. Example, Russia's constitution originally limited presidents to 2 terms. Controversial means causing strong disagreement between different people. Example, Putin is a very controversial world leader. Refugee means a person forced to leave their country, often because of war or danger. Example, the war created millions of refugees. Try to use these words in your own sentences. This will help you remember them. Now, let's practice speaking together. Repeat after me. Speak slowly and clearly. Putin grew up in a small apartment. He worked for the KGB for many years. He rose quietly through Russian politics. He became president in the year 2000. Some people see him as a strong leader. Other people see serious problems with his rule. He ordered the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. His story is still being written today. Practice these sentences 2 or 3 times. This will help your speaking and your confidence. Thank you so much for listening to this story today. I hope it helped you practice your English and think a little more carefully about a very important and very complicated world leader. Now, I have a few questions for you. What part of Putin's story surprised you the most? Why do you think powerful leaders sometimes affect the lives of millions of people they will never personally meet? What questions would you ask Vladimir Putin himself if you had the chance? Please write your answers in the comments below. And please keep your comments respectful, even if you disagree with each other. If you found this story informative, please like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more English learning stories. Take care, keep learning, and see you next time.